Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you. I didn't know anybody would be interested, but I'm glad you are. So what I want to do is tell you what I have in mind, and you can say, I don't want to do that, and I'll try to make a change, okay? What I wanted to do is talk through end-of-life planning in general. Service planning, options for how St. Thomas can support you or your grandma or your aunt or your friends nearby, because we do all of that, and then answer questions at the end. That's kind of what I had in mind to do. So I have a bunch of handouts. By the way, at any point say, that ain't what I wanted. I want you to talk about this, and I'll do my best. But consent to the agenda? Okay, so I've got a bunch of handouts, and the first one I want to give you is right on our website, and I will tell you, if you find it useful, by all means, feel free to farm it out to neighbors, friends, and family, because while it isn't perfect, I do think it walks through not only service planning, but just thinking about end-of-life planning. You've probably heard me say from the microphone that I have one of these in my firebox, and it is true that my wife would have no idea what to do for me. She would not. And even as clergy people, we don't always have clear options. Sometimes the bishops and bishops get involved in services for us. So we don't always know what our choices are. But my wife would not know what hymns I would like. And furthermore, what this guide does towards the end is it asks you to consider whether you've got a will, whether or not you have made arrangements for the final disposition of your body or person. I have one. I will also tell you that if you choose to fill this out, I will keep it in a file here at St. Thomas in a filing cabinet, and you can tell whoever, hey, my funeral plans are on file. Okay, and then we have it. Like I said, it starts with the service planning, but it goes all the way through. To the end, you'll see questions about, again, do you have a will? Do you have a trust? Do you have a funeral home in mind? That sort of thing, okay? The other handout I have, which you may or may not want, but I conveniently printed them. This is for service planning. The prayer book has recommended scripture. Now, you can pick any scripture you want, right? I mean, you can, depending who your priest is. With me, you can pick any scripture you want. I just want you to know the rules. If you want a Eucharist at your funeral, which is totally up to you, you have to have a gospel reading from some gospel. It can be any one you want, but there has to be one. Some people say, I don't like any of these readings. Totally fine. We can pick what makes sense for you. If you're interested, though, because most of you didn't grow up Baptist and doing sword drills like I did, I have printed out the readings from the prayer book. So I have them conveniently. Would anybody like one of those? I've got plenty to go around. You'll also find this on our website. So the reason I'm mentioning that you can find it on our website is you might have a neighbor who dies. And you might say to that neighbor, the survivor, what are the plans? And they may say, well, we don't really go to a church, so we don't know what to do. We do funerals for people we don't know. That is only right, in my opinion. So these resources you can connect other people with at home or at work or in family with at any time. And I am much more than happy to do what I can with it. Now, keep in mind, all this is a printout of what is already in the prayer book, but instead of making you look it up in the Bible, I've already looked it up for you. Does that make sense? Yeah. You may say, how many readings do I have to have? You don't have to have any readings unless you have a Eucharist. Then you have to have a gospel. Of course, we're used to 4 readings in a regular service. You don't have to have 4. Okay? Just want to be really clear about the have-tos. The other thing is we talk about service planning, and you will find it on the very back, are suggested hymns. Suggested. You can pick outside the list. Some people have really meaningful things for them, like in Luna Spencer's funeral, which I'll be doing in 2 weeks. In her family, there's a tradition marching to Zion. They sing that at every funeral. We will do that. There are some priests who will not let you do that. I want to make sure you know this. Some priests will say if it's not in the hymnal, you can't have it. I am not that priest. No surprise, but you just have to know that some people do this different, and that might play a role in where or how you pick to do a service. Another thing I have for you, if you want, is a sample bulletin, so that you can see what this looks like when we put it together. I'm the one who makes the bulletins here for funerals, not Ellen. I would not put that on her because it's a lot. So what you'll see is Lynn Spencer's service. This is Lynn Ann's husband, who we celebrated in 2016. You'll see how this is stacked up. He did want a Eucharist, and he wanted particular scriptures, and he wanted particular hymns. You don't have to have this, but I'll hand it out if you would like. Would anybody like a sample to go with their file? Again, it just shows what your choices are. And hey, maybe you don't need to put this in your binder, but maybe it helps you fill out that other guide so that you can know, again, how it kind of looks when we get it all together. There's lots of variations that we do with these, right? And I will tell you, if you wanted your service, again, this depends on who your priest is. If you say, I really want a Rumi poem, I'm really happy to read a Rumi poem or have somebody read a poem for you. Not all clergy will do that, though. You just need to know that. Some clergy will say, if it's not in the Bible, we're not reading it. Again, I'm not that priest, but you just need to know that some priests are that way, and I don't know how you win in that fight. I really don't know.
So the moral of the story is stay at St. Thomas.
Well, yeah, the moral of the story is you stay here, I'll stay here, and then we'll call it, right? Or else change your taste, right? Now, I will tell you, if you said, I really want to play Highway to Hell at my funeral, I probably would say, could you just tell me why? I mean, I'm not going to argue with you too much, but that one would seem a little suspicious. Yeah, anyway, okay. So let me do this, if you don't mind. We all know this. None of us are getting out of here without dying. Just none of us. I don't even care if you've read the Left Behind series and think you're going to be raptured. Let me just abuse you. In the Episcopal Church, that is not a thing. It's not a thing. And in the Bible, that's not a thing either. There is no such thing as a rapture. God comes to earth. We don't go up to heaven. That's how Revelation reads. Okay, so if you want to believe in that stuff, you can. Your priest does not. So we're all doing this one way or another. And the way we do this is really, really important. I will tell you, it's important to know, funerals are not for the person who died. They're not. God doesn't need it. They're for people who are living. So we plan these things softly. Because I can tell you, if I told my wife, I really want there to be a Eucharist, she'd probably participate in that, but that is not her need. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So hold this stuff softly, because sometimes when we make a hard plan, it may not only fail to honor the people we leave behind, it might exclude them. So consider, if people in your family do not want to or don't feel welcome at the Eucharist, and you insist on one, I just think through the spirituality of that. That's all I would ask you to consider, right? It used to be you had to have a Eucharist at the funeral. You don't have to do that. It is up to you. It is also maybe just fair to say to people who are behind you, these are my wishes, but of course the service is for you. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I can tell you, as you look through this guide, we don't do visitations here. We don't. This is for you to consider whether you want to do that. Now, I grew up in Kentucky and we have wakes, but that is disappearing, right? It's disappearing nationwide, worldwide, the imposition of a wake. There's nothing wrong with it. I just want you to know we don't do them here. So when you think through what your funeral planning is, that's the thing that you consider. Do I want a wake or not? Or a viewing? Obviously, if you're going to be cremated, very much look at. It's not, right? But this is meant to guide you outside. The funeral homes work really, really hard. They do some great work. I don't recommend one over another. The two in this area are Crowder and Jeter. Those are the two I know really well. Crowder always treats us really well. I'll just tell you that. And Jeter has too, although I had less experience with them. More people go to the Crowder. You get to decide, do you want to be embalmed and buried in a coffin? Of course. You get to decide whether you want to be cremated. I want to put to rest, about 50 years ago, and this has really changed even more so the last 20, people said, well, if I'm cremated, I won't be resurrected. And listen, if God can reconstitute you from bones, I mean, a miracle is a miracle, right? So let me just put you to rest. The standard of the national church, your particular priest as well, is it's all a miracle to God. And all cremation really does is accelerate what the ground's going to do anyway, right? So you have to kind of come to peace with yourself, but I do want you to know the position of the church is that that's just fine, okay? I don't want to be crass, but I do want you to know, whether you weigh 500 pounds or 50 pounds, you're going to have the same volume when it's up. That is counterintuitive, but it is the case. And it's really important, if you're thinking about being cremated and being interred somewhere, to ask really carefully, do I need my own urn? We have a columbarium here. It has boxes, we call them urns. You're going in that box. Now you might have a ruby-studded box. I'm either sending that home or you're leaving it with me, but you're not going in it. Does this make sense? Because you won't fit. So these boxes are absolutely calculated to fit two in a position. And you just need to know that many places that have columbarium have requirements like that. Of course, when you go to a funeral home, I'm not putting them down, but they want to honor your wishes of having something nice, and you're at a vulnerable moment. They're not taking advantage of you. They're trying to honor you, but you can feel very much like, oh, I'm supposed to get something fancy. Just know the requirements before, right? Whether it's here or at St. Christopher's or at Arlington Cemetery, every place has its own requirements per cremains. It's okay if I just talk through the rest of this? Yeah. I don't want to bore you. Time of the service. This sounds silly. Obviously, the people that behind are going to figure this out for you. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry to interrupt, but there was one thing very traumatic that happened about the burial of the ashes when my husband died, because it had a long last name. It was literally, they would not permit the last name on the whatever that is on the. They would not do it. It was extremely traumatic.
Of course.
I took him all the way back to Peru to be buried, to be able to get someplace that I cared about that would put his name. So this is something, you have a long last name and you want to go in a specific spot, you might want to see what their flexibility is on the grave.
Thank you.
Because you're very vulnerable, you're just trying to get the ashes buried. Yes, you've already bought the space and then they said no.
Thank you. And I'm going to return to that when I talk about what we do here, but that's a really good point of awareness, a really good point of awareness. I would also tell you, if you want to put somebody's full name and 4 of their nicknames, you might be creating a little trouble for yourself, right? So you do have to think through that carefully. And when it comes to something being engraved, that happens one time. So you might say, well, now that that's done, I wish I'd done something different. Nobody's going to work with you on that. There's no working with engraving, right? When it goes into granite or stone or cement, there's no eraser for that. So you're better off taking your time until you know what you want it to say, making sure they're going to do it the way you'd like, than saying, well, let's just have it say this thing. I'll give you an example of that and just, well, I'll give you an example right now. Jim Niebler, right? His name, of course, is James. Nobody called him that. He really wanted his, or Britta really wanted James Jim Niebler. So we put Jim in quotes, and what that resulted in order to make it fit, is we had to shrink the font size. It's still there, just like that. It all fits. It just means the font is smaller. You can't have everything you want. If you want it to be the same font size, there is an actual limit. But that's how we handle it, is we put what you want. If it were a paragraph, we couldn't do it. I mean, it'd be 10-point font, right? So that's how we do it. Sometimes you'll have to know, it may shrink the font size especially if you're doing something that's a stone, even on a brass flat. But hopefully that's a way that we accommodate what you'd like. Time of service. All I would tell you is this matters probably more to the people who come behind you, but if you have a service at noon, you're going to be feeding people lunch. You just need to know that. So when I talk to family, I say you might consider 10 or 2. That way you don't have to serve them lunch, but you can if you want, right? Some people want to do that. We don't provide that here. You would have to cater that. We provide a light reception. This is the ministry of the Daughters of the King. It's really lovely, but it's like finger food to help people kind of talk and connect. We do that for free. This is what the daughters do as their gift of service, but it isn't a plated meal, and they're not going to do that, right? So this is just good to know. So when people say, we think we want to have a service at 11, my concern is people are going to expect you to feed them. Service at 9 or 10, not an expectation. Reception. I did this yesterday, and look, it's a little bit confusing, but I'll tell you what, a parishioner taught me this, and this is my own plan for my wife, because this is what she'll need. Some people have the reception first. So yesterday, we told everybody the funeral's at 1 o'clock. When they got here at 1, there was a reception. At 1:30, we all went into church. When church was over, everybody went home. Why does it matter? Because loved ones know how long they're on the clock. When the reception comes second, they could be held captive all afternoon. I hope you understand what I mean when I say held captive. If you want it, it's fine. If you want to do privately with your family and friends, you can feel fettered, right? So this is just good to know. In my funeral plan, reception first, because my wife, I just don't want her to have to deal with people for 2.5 hours. She's not a public grieving person. She's not. So that's my plan, not just for myself, but on her behalf. Does that make sense? You get to pick it. Will the remains be present? You need to know that if you're cremated, it takes 2 to 3 weeks, and since COVID, it takes 4 weeks, is what they tell you to get it back. We just did a service here for a lady who died Tuesday, Susie. There was no way they were going to have the ashes ready yesterday. No way. You don't have to have them. I don't bless the ashes. There's nothing holy about them. This is just your final remains. If you come in embalmed in a casket, I don't bless your body. We don't do that, right? So you don't have to have your final body or cremains at a service. If you want it, just know it will take a little longer to get them there than the same week. Yes, ma'am.
I don't hear well, and I want to be sure I hear this. It's important. Did I hear you say that you will not have a body present at a funeral?
I will have a body present, but we don't do viewings here.
But you don't do what?
Viewings or a wake. We don't do a wake.
Okay.
And I will tell you, every priest is different, but I will never celebrate an open casket funeral. I will not do it. So if you want a casket here, I'm very happy to do that, but we keep that close. Does that make sense? Yeah. Theologically, I believe that distracts from what we're there to do, right? So that happens at a viewing or a wake, but it does not happen in this church while I'm the rector. And I won't allow any other priest to do it either. Before the service, it's okay. So I could back up. If you wanted to have a viewing in the sanctuary with an open casket, you could do that. But when it's time for the service, we're closing the lid. Does that make sense? Yeah. You don't have to agree. I just want you to know the rules. You don't have to have communion, but you can. You don't have to even pick the scriptures. You could say, I trust the priest. I have a box for that. You can pick your own service. I will tell you, it's interesting how many people go to 10:30 and are very used to Love Rite 2, but they want Rite 1 at their funeral because they find it to be very solemn. Not old-fashioned, but solemn. That's your choice. Just let people know what you would like. Okay, I've already talked about the readings. I already talked about the hymns. Now, I will tell you this. Let's pretend you grew up, I don't know, let's pretend most of your friends don't go to church. And you want to have 7 hymns. You're only going to hear me sing them. good news, you'll already be dead because we're still over the edge. So it is just helpful to consider whether or not people coming know the hymns. Otherwise, you might prefer to have a solo. Yes, ma'am.
Can you play or recording if somebody?
Oh, of course we can. Bob has set this up. Her beauty. I just turned it down. Let's get it.
Elvis.
You know, again, I will tell you that depends on your clergy. There are clergy who will allow nothing but what's in the hymnal. I mean, they won't even allow something from the Baptist hymn. Me, I'm a lot more open. But like I said, if you want to play Love Me Tender, I just probably ask why. I love Me Tender.
There wasn't what I had.
Yeah, no, I get it. But I've had interesting things played, and for good reasons. I said, yes, let's do that. That's who the person was, right? And that's what the family perceives they need. So that's me, but you will find different stances among the clergy. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
You can skip.
You can have no music whatsoever. In fact, if you're wondering, this is really helpful to know. We don't charge for funerals here, but we do ask you help us recoup costs. Right? So I have to pay an organist $225. That's what I have to pay them to come, right? That actually costs us money as an organization. It's nice if you give that to us. Does that make sense? So that we're not running an operating deficit for an unplanned expense. Normally, what we suggest to members is $500. That covers the organist, the flowers. It makes a donation to either the Altar Guild or the DOK or the Rector's Discretionary Fund or all three. We do suggest to non-members $750 because, look, we spend time together. It actually makes it easier for me to do the service for you. I don't know if that makes sense. It's a suggestion. If you're not able, we absorb the whole cost. But I'm telling you these numbers because most people want to contribute. They just don't kind of know what's profit. These are minimums. You do what you want. But I just want you to know we end up spending $60 to $100 on flowers, $225 on an organist, and then honestly, the Altar Guild and the DOK, they're not budgeted accounts, so they live on donations. If that makes sense. I already get paid, so you don't pay me to do a funeral. You don't. Rector's Discretionary does not go in my pocket; it goes in an account here that's spent on things for here. Please.
So the people are not allowed, it is not your practice to have somebody hire their own organist.
You may.
But you can.
You absolutely may.
A guest organist, and soloist and trumpet or whatever. Okay, all of that you could do that.
You could, and I would only ask that you not like do all that and have us pay for them, unless you're passing money through. Does that make sense? If you want Johann Sebastian Bach to come and play, and like if you can dig him up out of the dirt and reanimate him, and you can do that, please do. I would love to hear it. If you've got somebody who means a great deal to you to play the piano or organ, absolutely permitted. Normally people don't, and I have to find that person. And I've got 3 or 4 people we go to who usually say yes, and I have 3 others in case they say no. Right? But not everybody knows an organist or a pianist. And I also have some soloists, like kind of in the bullpen that I can ask, but they are soloists for hire. You have to know that. So I'm happy to work through any of that with you, or you can put that in your plan. But just sort of know when you do that, it's kind of nice if you take care of it. Mary.
To take care of it. Are you okay with bagpipes?
Yes, I'm okay with castanets.
Look what it's wearing.
No instrument is like ungodly. I mean, I don't believe that. So, and if you wanted acoustic guitars, that's fine too. It's your service, not mine. Yes, ma'am.
Under receptions, you want us to write in before the service?
Yes, if you want it before the service, please just do it right in there. Yeah.
Like, when people are not familiar with the church, is there some way that we can communicate to them that it is maybe not expected, but the nice thing to do is to leave, give money to the DOK who's putting everything together?
Yeah.
Because I've had friends who came here and they didn't have a clue.
So Vicki asks, if someone's not familiar with the church, is it okay to leave a note? There's a note section here. Leave a donation to the DOK, leave a donation to whatever. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I can't tell you how many times I've met with families. Their dad, their mom was a member of the vestry for 20 years. And I said, well, hey, you know, in lieu of flowers, is there a place you'd like to send? Like, well, I don't know. Dad really liked animals. So, like maybe the Humane Society. And I will tell you, sometimes I say, your dad really loved this church. I just want you to know that, right? So if you're scratching your head on a thing your dad loved, let me help you. It's the Episcopal Church, the Diocese of Texas, it's St. Thomas, right? And so I would tell you, like St. Thomas is in my will. It is. It doesn't have to be in yours, but legacies and things that are important to you, it's good to identify, because sometimes people will say, well, I didn't know church was that important to mom. How they didn't know that, I don't know, but it's nice to give people a guide of what's important to you, including DOK and Altar Guild and whatever it is you have in mind. I want to say I think it's because it's a lack of understanding. I think we don't always know. Maybe that's being generous with me. That's okay. I'd rather be generous than not. And it is absolutely okay if you say, hey, I really want you to make a contribution to blank, like a new frontal or a new thing, right? Like, I didn't want to pay for that while I'm alive, but I want part of my estate or memorial gifts to go toward that thing. You can say that. Whether people do it or not, I don't know, but you get to say that. And the more you say, the more you're likely to get what it is you'd like. Letter I, eulogy. You may say, I don't want a eulogy. Yes, you do. You do, because a eulogy is not saying like all the wonderful things you did in your life. It's a reminder to everybody in the room, the character of the person that we're handing over to God. And I can tell you, having done like 200 of these, if you don't have a eulogy, it is not a spirit-filled service. It just is not. Who should give your eulogy? Somebody who can. Somebody who can. What do I mean by that? A eulogy should be no more than 5 minutes. It's not about the person speaking, it's about the person who died. The worst eulogy I have ever heard came from another clergy person who talked 5 minutes about all the things that person did for them. That's called narcissism. A eulogy is about the person who died, not what they just did for me. Does that make sense? The best eulogies are honest, sometimes irreverent. I can still remember some lines, like when Carolyn Judy's husband Dwight died, there was a story that showed up. Daughter got up and said, this is who my dad was. He went shopping to get mom a car, and mom's only wish was that it would be a blue car. Well, dad was colorblind, but he knew that car was blue, and he didn't ask. So when he drove the brown car home, he still knew it was blue. And that's who Dwight was. Anything wrong with that? In fact, that's the kind of thing you miss the most, are like the irregularities. It is okay to tell an irreverent story in church because that's who we are. If it's longer than 5 minutes, it starts to become penance. I mean, and if there's more than 2 of them or 3 of them, it really starts to become penance. You swap stories at the reception or later. In church, we just need 2 or 3 reminders at most about who we're giving to God. Okay. Again, please don't say, I don't want one. It is good to know that sometimes family members say, I can't read it. I wouldn't be able to get through it. I'll read it. A verger will read it, but your service will be very weak without it for the people who need culture. Okay, we talked about reception. There's the spot, Susan, for before burial. Just make sure that those in your life know what you want. Do you want to be put in a coffin and buried, or do you want to be cremated? This is really, really important. If you want to be put in a coffin, nothing wrong with that. Truly, there's nothing wrong with whatever you pick. Just know that we got 10 days to do this. 10 days. So we'll have to do it a little faster. If you're cremated, have as long as you want. And you'll notice Janet Morgan and Lynn Ann Spencer, what their family needed was 6 and 12 weeks to get everybody together. That's okay. In fact, I would tell you, and you probably most of you know this, the first I don't know how long you'd say, at least month. Survivor is frantic, not frantic, but very busy, switching Social Security, clearing titles. So if the funeral is just another thing to do, it doesn't do the holy part, which is give us closure. So if you come to a funeral trying to check a box, you'll check the box, but you may not get the deeper things. Does that make sense? Now, if you want a physical burial, you're going to have to move it along. You just have to. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but my hope for everybody in the room is that there's enough time for it to be holy closure and not just another thing I got to do. Does that make sense? I don't know how to guarantee that. In my own life, it'll probably be another thing to do. Okay. It's okay if you want flowers. Most people say in lieu of flowers, I'd rather somebody give to the Alzheimer's Association or whatever. You can just say where it is you want it to go, right? Your family may decide I want the flowers. That's fine, right? Nothing wrong with it. But if that's not a thing you want, you just let them know. I'm not writing my own obituary. I don't know. You have to pay for those nowadays. You do. And so they're not inexpensive. And particularly if you're giving information to somebody to write them. So you just need to know that. I've got the basics here to guide the writing of an obituary if you want. If you go somewhere like Crowder or Jeter, part of their package will be doing that and publishing it on their website. To get it in the Chronicle, it's an additional fee that you'll pay the Chronicle. Please make sure your survivors know whether or not you have a will or trust and who prepared it if they're still around, because they'll help execute it for you, right? Maybe it's just important for me to speak to this. Andy Lewis has told us, and he's the chancellor for the parish. So he's an attorney. He's a trust and estate attorney. That's all he does. And by all, he's the best in the area. I mean, this is kind of universally understood, right? He's told me that in Texas, your assets are going to go to probate if you have a will, but that the cost of probate is approximately equivalent to the cost of making a trust. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I do want you to know that the difference between a will and a trust in general is that when you create a trust, the asset passes to the designee of the trust without having to go to probate, which saves time for the person getting it, but it does have a higher cost. So usually a will is like $750 if you have an attorney do it. Please don't do it online. If you have the money, have an attorney do it. Just please. I'm married to an attorney. People commit malpractice when they do it at home. I just want you to know. If you have it, and if you don't, talk to Andy, and he'll have a sliding scale for you. That's his ministry to us. Hope that's okay, Andy. So anyway, we have a trust. My wife and I have a trust. And part of the reason is when we lived in California, the average probate court cost in California was $30,000. Now, we had a $500,000 mortgage. That was the price of living. So my kids were going to have to pay $30,000 to assume my mortgage. We didn't want that. So we paid to have a trust, right? The trust would pass the house right to them, and then they could liquidate the property, and then they'd have the money, right? And they wouldn't have to wait 2 months for it to clear probate. Every state is a little different, and I'm not a pro in Texas, and I still have a trust here. Yes, ma'am.
My dad had a trust. When he died, he forgot to put his car in the trust. And they had to go to probate to sell the car.
Actually, there's a form that you can go and fill out. I found it out.
In the state of Texas, when you write, you can use the form. It may not be good.
Okay, this was in Ohio.
Particularly, and every state is different. And keep in mind that the land value in California is a lot higher in general than the land value here, hence the disparity in probate costs. Ken.
I was just going to say, my dad, in a maybe a unique situation, because I was the only one left, just put me on everything.
Yep.
I was a co-owner, so I didn't have to go to probate.
So my mother's done that with her checking account because I'm the executor of her will, which means I don't have to go to probate to pay the funeral costs because I can pay them out of her checking account. Like I'm on it right now. If I didn't trust my kid, I would not do that because they can access your account, right? Like I can withdraw money from her account right now if I want to. We're not doing that. we know that. But this is the thing you might consider, particularly as you perceive, hey, I might only have 5 years left. You might talk to somebody because again, otherwise they have to wait for probate to clear that account. Even if you have it in a trust, if they're not on there, the bank there may be some hiccup. And if you pay for cremation or embalming or something like that, that'll be out of pocket for your survivor instead of out of your own funds. Does that make sense?
I use in largely beneficiary designations because, and we went through this with my father, we had a trust and beneficiary designations. Only thing we had to go to probate for was the house. Everything else, we just walked in with the death certificate and they just canceled that account and they made a new one in my name and my sister's. That was it. It was easy. And the trust was really a nightmare because every single year, the trust is an independent entity.
Yeah.
It has an independent number and you have got to go through. So think seriously before you just throw everything in the trust.
And this is why talking to Andy, I'm not an attorney. And I will tell you in a trust, like I've got 2 kids, I can decide the rules. My kids can't have anything till they're 30. That's one of the rules I've insisted on. I have a guardian of the trust who can decide whether they get it earlier or not. And that decision may be based on education or first home or they need a new car, right? But at 30, the magic happens for them. But I also have beneficiary designations. So let's pretend I wanted one kid to have my 401k and I wanted the other kid to have my church pension. I make those beneficiary designations. Doesn't matter what the trust says, they get what I designate. Does that make sense? The trust might say split it equally, but if the beneficiary designation says Emery gets all of this one, Danny gets all of this one, that's how it will be. I hope that makes sense.
One thing I was just going to say is you're talking about Social Security and different things like that. When the first thing I had to deal with when my dad died in the hospital was what do we do with his body? I had to have immediately tell them what to do, or at least the next day.
This is why
I have that plan.
This is why I recommend this. Going to a couple of members of your family, give me one, I'll keep it here, and then people will know, oh, we're going for a graveside service.
Yeah, and then the second thing is when they ask you for a death certificate, get a dozen.
Yeah.
Don't get one.
Yeah. Same with a marriage license. It's always good to have more than one copy, right? These documents follow you forever. This is really good.
That's what was nice about Crowder. We went, and he said, your birth certificate, and I said, well, how many death certificate? And I said, well, how many should I get? He said, well, I suggest about 10.
Yeah.
Because it's, just that's what everybody wants to do.
And this is hopefully where funeral homes can be your friends. I just want you to be aware that they're not your only friends, right? So thinking through in advance can be helpful. Power of attorney, particularly medical power of attorney, every state does this differently, but in Texas, that is a legally binding document. So if I say I'm a DNR, do not resuscitate under the following conditions, the doctor should have to follow that. The way you make that happen, this is good to know, is you insist when your spouse goes to the hospital, that gets put in the chart. Because if it doesn't get put in the chart, they didn't know. And they may not follow it. I've been a chaplain in a heart hospital, and I've had to tell the code team, stop. They have a DNR bracelet, and they're still giving CPR. Stop. It's in the chart. So I do want to prepare you. You have to advocate sometimes, but I also want to tell you that one of the most excruciating things you will ever do is decide when to take somebody's food or hydration away. So what is a gift to your family is you tell them when to take it away instead of them having to decide.
And argue about it.
You can be really specific. Now, my wife disagrees with me, and she'll ultimately be the one who gets to choose. For For me, there's got to be an 80% chance of recovery. Those are Russian roulette odds. You might be okay with 50-50. You get to make your own wishes known. Does that make sense? But I do not want to be on hydration and a feeding tube when there's a 30% chance of success. I don't want that. My wife may want it, I don't. I choose. And I put that in my medical advance directive. Okay? That goes with my trust. That goes with my wife. It lays in my firebox. My mother, who is my guardian number one, has these documents as well. This may seem morbid. It isn't. It's a gift. I don't know if you've ever had to pull life support from a parent. It's excruciating. You can sit there and think, did I do the right thing? I did what Dad told me to do. That is much better.
Yes. Can tell you that hospice wage paid, they have those documents.
Thank you. Thank you. Military honors are a lovely thing. We don't do them in church. I will do them at the graveside. I will do them in the columbarium chapel. I don't do them in the service because I grew up Baptist and I believe in the separation of church and state. I do believe in honoring veterans. We do that at the graveside. I will never process an American flag in a funeral. I don't believe in it. Your next priest might. I won't do it. I will not have a 21 gun salute in the sanctuary. For obvious reasons. At the graveside, I believe in that honor. I think it's a lovely tradition. Handing a flag, that happens at the graveside. It does not happen in the service. It does not. Not with me. Yes, ma'am.
If you don't have a graveside, if it's going to be, okay, that's.
So it's not just me. That's also the way the military does it. I just want to clear that up. Yeah. And I came from a military parish. The hymn everybody had in Coronado, can you guess what it is? Eternal Father, strong to save. That's the Navy hymn. Even if you weren't in the Navy, we were doing that hymn. So then we did the military things after the service. That's just what we did.
We could do it outside the church then.
Absolutely. Like if you wanted to afterwards have it on the lawn, we'd be happy to do it. I just don't think theologically it belongs in the service. It's also distracting.
Right.
But it is important to honor that service. It just happens at a different moment than in the sanctuary. I hope that makes sense. Your next priest may be different. Okay, I walked you through that document. Let me talk to you about what we do at St. Thomas. Your choices here, and a couple of other things you may think through. Of course, we have right now, and I did bring copies of this. Not everybody wants one, but we do have a columbarium and a chapel, right? And the columbarium has a fee associated with it because we spent money on it, and we spend money engraving it. And down the road, we might need another one, so we sort of build up to do that. I'm not pushing the product, but we do have one. It's for interment of ashes. There is a place that is beautiful to go and remember. And I will tell you up front, a lot of people say, Dad wanted to be scattered in the whatever creek in Phoebus, Virginia. That was Chris Pratt's wish. Nothing wrong with that wish. But if you're a survivor, you have nowhere to go. Oh, Mike, you could go to that creek. Let's get serious. You're not going there. So what I suggest to people pastorally is you might consider sprinkling somewhere and then having some other ashes where people can come and contemplate you seriously, whether that's on your home or on the church property. You just choose to kind of be sprinkled in the flower bed. That's happened before. It's legal because I give you permission to do it. If I didn't, I could take you to court. Isn't that weird? But we had a lady sprinkled on the playground. That was her wish. She was not ultimately interred in the columbarium, but if her kids want to remember her, they come to the playground. That's accessible. It's a real place. So columbarium is the thing we have. If you're interested, I have like the information and contract in my hand. I will give it to you now if you want one. You don't have to want one. Some of you have already prepaid for this.
That's another story.
That's another story. We're working on it.
Did they run out of the one?
Yeah, no, it's just.
That's other people.
We'll tell you what is lovely about the columbarium from a priestly perspective, And you've already paid for yours. What's lovely about it is that there are days of the week where I will come in to get ready for a service, and somebody has laid flowers next to the columbarium without my awareness. That's how it ought to be. The columbarium is visitable during open hours all the time. And if you want to come outside of it, let me know or Sean know, and we'll figure out how to get somebody in, right? Obviously, you can't come in the middle of the night because I'm going to sleep. I'm not letting you in. But people do visit, and again, they have frankly, a beautiful place to sit and pray or talk to you or whatever it is that you need. Keep in mind, you don't need this. It's for people who come after you. God doesn't need it either. But people who come after you might, and they might enjoy it. The way my dad grew up, and times are changing. Every time we visited home for him, he went to the cemetery, he took care of plants, and people don't do that anymore. I just want you to know. People under the age of 50 do not do that. But I will also tell you, people under the age of 50 and above like to know that there is a place. If your heirs didn't need that, they don't need it. But this is a conversation to have. Hey, I'm thinking about having a place for you to visit. Here are my thoughts. Whether that's cemetery, a columbarium somewhere, or even a place where you want to be sprinkled in the ground or whatever. Look, I'm not a salesman, so I'm not pushing this, but I will tell you our columbarium is way underpriced, and it is half the price of anywhere else. I'm not trying to say it's a deal. It's a ministry, and that's why it's priced like that. If you want to be interred at the St. Christopher's columbarium, ×2. At the one at a Good Shepherd in Friendswood, it's ×2. ×2. I want to be really clear too. Some people say, don't you have to be a member to be put in the columbarium? Not while I'm the priest. The contract says yes, subject to rector's approval. I don't believe in that. I don't. So we provide this space as a community service. But I do want you to know the diocese will not allow us to inter a pet in the columbarium. Will not. It is against the rules. Also, when you read the columbarium contract, and this is good to know whether you go somewhere, anywhere, what can you put in the box? Some people will say nothing. I'm not like that. But you need to know not everybody feels the same. So I've had people put wedding rings in the box. I think that is a huge sacrifice and honor that I only have respect for. And you don't have to do it. And some people won't. If you're a member of the DOK, you probably know your cross is supposed to go back to national or be buried with you. I consider it going in the box with your ash as a burial, so I will do that. I actually don't care what national says. I will do that. I don't even want to ask because I don't care. I consider that burial and an honor and matching your intention. As I said, we have very specific boxes that are sized. So, by the way, everybody fits in the box. Everybody fits. And I also will tell you, funeral homes will divide your ashes. I will divide your ashes if that's what you want, and provide remnant to your survivors to sprinkle or do what they want. Okay. I'm also sort of happy to tell you that probably by September, we will have a garden plot available outside the sanctuary where pets can be interred. Pets can be interred, but also humans can be interred. Ashes. Now, this looks really different from the columbarium, but I just want you to hear what it will look like. This is called a memorial garden. There are not named plots. I know where everybody goes, but everybody's name's on a plaque and they're in the ground. So there's not a, well, and look, everybody wants different things, and that's not wrong. It's what you want, right? So some people want their ashes directly in the ground. I cannot put a container. I mean, that's a hole and a pour and a cover up. And then your name and your dates go on a plaque that say, in memory of this person. I don't commingle ashes, but I don't tell people where you are either. Does that make sense? When people come to the service, they know where you are. And I suspect there will be flowers there sometimes during the year. like on your birthday or a wedding anniversary, or perhaps on the anniversary of your death. I'm allowed to do pets outside. And there'll be just a distinct pet area, but let's be honest. Some people don't care about pets. Pets are members of our families. That's my opinion. You may say, it's just a dog. We didn't treat it like a dog. We treated Maggie like a full member of our family. I don't want her on the mantle of my home. So Maggie will be one of the first pets interred in the pet area. There will probably be a statue of St. Francis. And that will be a time where we can spend with those things. Now, I don't have a contract for this. The vestry has to accept the underwriting. I think they will accept this gift. Somebody has offered to underwrite the entire thing within like 2 months. And so that's why I'm saying September or October, or let's just, church is always float. Let's say December. That's probably true. But this is hopefully in the cards for us here. Even if they don't have it, if you said, I really want to be interred in the flower bed, I'll do that. I'll do that. But I won't have a plaque for you. So you decide if you want that. I do want you to know the only person who decides what happens on any Episcopal campus, if it's a parish, it's the rector. If it's a mission, it's the bishop. Your next priest may say, I'm not allowing that. I will enthusiastically allow and encourage that if that's your wish. Does that make sense?
But we need to die before you leave.
No. No, I hope you outlive my tenure. I do. I hope you outlive my tenure. Okay. Hey, I want
to ask a plaque question.
Yes.
Is it marble? Is it granite?
I think it'll be cast bronze because that'll uphold the weather. We'll have to polish it every now and again, but something like cast metal, and then they'll have one-way screws as we add names, or else they'll be engraved. We're talking about a memorial garden right now, right? Yeah. Not the columbarium. The columbarium is granite, and it gets, your name is engraved in the granite. If you go outside, the vision, and I don't have it today, but I'm telling you the vision is, there'll be a cast plaque, and each with room for additional names with one-way screws to be added, instead of having to take the plaque down and put it back up, and plaque down and put it back up. This may sound chintzy. It isn't. We had one in Coronado where I came from. The plaque cost $5,000 to cast. And then the blanks, right, were 1/8 of an inch thick. So they weathered pretty darn well. Also in saltwater climate.
So I'm confused because I've never seen this before. I've seen marble and granite.
Yes.
Engraved on the ground.
Not doing that.
With the box in the ground. No.
Not against the law. Can't do it. Maybe you don't want this diatribe, but there is such a thing as a funeral lobby in the state of Texas. And the funeral lobby opposes things like that because it takes away business from them.
Okay, it's St. Timothy's and Jackson, where went for 45 years. Okay, they went through a lot of stuff, and it's an area, and they have these urns inside of it, and it is outside.
So that's a columbarium then, and we're not.
It's
in the ground.
In the ground.
Yeah, but it's a columbarium.
Okay, it has another anyway. Okay, and then they have something above it that lacks fits for people whose bodies are not there. Okay, so if you want to do that, you got to go to St. Timothy's.
I think so, and you just have to know that they may have a thing that you can no longer get, which is a cemetery designation.
It took a long time, whatever it was.
Texas doesn't like to give them. The diocese doesn't like to permit them because it changes the value of the land forever. Scattering ashes does not make it a cemetery. You can do that anyway. And keep in mind, per the law, I can't bury a container, but ashes are organic material. They don't affect water quality at all. And you understand in Houston, within 20 minutes, they're gone. I mean, they've been totally dissolved into the soil, right? I mean, that's, for lack of a better word, that's that. It may be that instead of a plaque outside, we engrave the bench, which will be like cement. It may be we engrave in the cement your name, but like I say, it won't be Marie's right here. There won't be a specific thing over each block.
Because she's not.
Because she's in the garden, right? Whoever is in the garden is in the garden. Okay, Yes, Mary.
What for the columbarium?
It's in the contract, and what we do, I think it's $12.50 for one, and if you buy 2 niches, it's $20.50. Again, that's half the cost anywhere else. I'm not selling things. You just need to know in general what costs are. Cost of cremation. Has anybody done this recently?
Yeah.
It's about $1,500. Cost of a physical burial is about $10,000, and that's if you already own the plot.
The cremation I paid for recently was 3,000.
3,000. Okay, and costs are going up. We know that.
That was in Montana or Wyoming.
Okay. Some people choose to prepay. Like you can prepay your cremation right now. I don't know what that looks like with the Crowder brothers or Jeter. I think the Neptune Society will do that. I don't know what it costs, but you can do that. Some people prepay for their church service.
Dignity does it.
Dignity does it too. Some people say, I want to decompose in the ground. Like I want to organically have my buried bodied and this. It's illegal in the state of Texas. And you can do that like in Oregon and maybe some other state, but you can't do it here legally, like be wrapped in a bag and thrown in a hole. You have to be in a box.
Mike,
Yes, ma'am.
several years ago, you gave us, I don't know, a 5 or 6 page fill in the information.
That's it. I just gave it to you. It's the first handout. It's the one that says funeral planning guide.
But the one you gave me had like 6 pages to it.
1, 2, 3, 4,
No,
5.
it was all fill in the blank.
Well, I've changed it to be check a box
Okay.
to try to make that easier. So there are fewer blanks and more boxes to check.
So this is it.
That's it. That's it. I'll handle the old one just fine. But anyway, here's the new one.
Thank you.
What other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Big pet peeve, it gets to me every single time you send out a death notice. I don't know these people, it may be one of you who has died,
Yeah.
and I haven't learned your name yet. There is no photo, there is no link, there is no, I could just literally cry thinking about this because it happens frequently to get these notices. I don't know who's dying here.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't always have photos of people. So if I've got a photo of you, I can include it. I don't have a photo of Dave Matheny. Didn't have one. And the photo I had of Susie is probably not the one she wanted because it was Susie on chemotherapy. So send me a photo, or I can use your directory photo. But I don't think Susie wanted her directory photo used because her face looked like she'd been stung by 5 bees because she was on chemotherapy. But that's all I had, right?
It might help person know who that is if you refer to your director.
Yeah, or I think what Marie's also asking is, can we enclose a photo with an announcement? If I have one, I can. If I don't have one, I can't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or a link to.
Or a link to an obituary. If I have it, I can do it. But if I don't have it, I can't do it.
Mike,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question that probably doesn't have anything to do with that.
It's your time, not mine. Yeah.
I have a plot in the mausoleum at the former Bishop in Dallas. How does that work to get me up there?
Yeah, the funeral homes, this is what they do, right?
Okay.
So if it's a body, there's all kinds of legal things. If it's cremains, there are fewer legal things. And nonetheless, they are the ones who help navigate that. Now, I'll tell you, for example, a lot of families stress about this locally. I'm going to be cremated at Crowder, and then how do I get the ashes to St. Thomas? They bring them as a courtesy. They bring them, or somebody can come pick them up and bring them. If you're cremated, you can drive it to Dallas. If it's a body against the law, they have to do it through like medical transport.
Okay, I have a slot.
In a columbarium.
It
Mausoleum, so
Mausoleum,
physical body going
yeah.
in. Yeah.
So can I put ashes in there?
You have to look at the contract.
Okay.
Everybody does that different. But again, if you're moving your body to Montana or you're moving your body to Wichita Falls, your husband can't do that for you. I just want to be really clear. If it's a body, it has to go in medical transport per state funerary laws. And hopefully somewhere like Crowder or Jeter or wherever you go navigates that for you. It's their job to. So if they ever act like they're not going to, you say, no, look, this is what I'm paying you to do, right? You may have to advocate for yourself.
My mother died in Canada, where my brother was stationed. It was quite the process.
That's an international order, yeah.
But he was with the State Department, which helped. But it was quite the process to get her back to work.
Her body?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Still is, yeah,
so the video might have died for Peru.
right.
Or this actual fact that all this hassle to find out that all you do is put the ashes in your suitcase and then let them go.
Ashes are pretty easy,
If you don't make a big deal about it.
right.
Okay.
Are there other questions on these items or not? Again, this is meant to be your time.
Very helpful. Very, very helpful.
Well, again, we never know when it's our time. We just don't know. We don't know. But having a plan, I think, is really, really helpful. Even if somebody says, I don't want to do that, at least they know what you want. Right? And that is a lovely gift. Susan?
Somebody suggested this to me a few years ago, and it's called an end of life book. And I've got copies of, insurance policies and title to my car and all this stuff in plastic sleeves and stuff like that, so it's easy for my daughter.
I'll tell you something else that is also really lovely, is if you have things that are important to you, make sure people know what's important to you. And if you have things that you think your children will never fight over, don't give them that opportunity. Don't do it. It's rare that it causes an issue, but my grandparents died 40 years ago, and they had a 100-acre farm that was supposed to be split 10 ways among their 10 kids. Only 2 parcels are clear now, 2 out of the 10, because one of the children refuses to clear title for the other, frankly, out of bitterness and spite. Of course, all that does is dishonor that person's parents, right? But if you can take care of anything contentious, I would just encourage you to do it, because it's still unclear in my own family. And this is now my inheritance, right? And it's really complicated. And it could have been done more easily, I just want to say. And of course, you never think your kids are going to bicker. The fewer chances you give them, I would say, the better.
And it's funny the things they bicker about.
It's always funny. And of course, it's not actually about the thing, it's about a memory, right? If you have a corner cupboard, my dad had a corner cupboard made out of a tree that used to be in his childhood home. It's really important that that stays in the family. Neither one of us want it. So I know what to do with it. I know who to give it to in the family, because my mom talked me through that. My mom said, do you want this china that I've accrued for you? No, I don't use china unless I can put it in the dishwasher. And you're not supposed to. So I don't need that. So we've already had that conversation. And my mom is saying, do you want this? No. Okay, I'm either going to do this, that, or the other with it. You may be 60 and in perfectly good health. It's okay to do that. This thing is really important to me, or it isn't. If you don't want it, it's really important to your Uncle Gary that he gets the thing. Please give it to him, right? This is kind of what you do in a will, hopefully. It's good to think through. It's good to think through if you can't.
This is a time to put in a plug for the nearly new, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? I plan to probably do that.
Yes, but the nearly new. If they grocery go and do things, give things away that don't belong to their spouse or their child. We are very accepted.
Just to make sure everybody heard that, we have a thrift shop called the Nearly New. And sometimes when kids get, or husbands or wives get assets they don't want, they send them to the Nearly New, and that money goes outside of itself to local charities, quite honestly. I mean, all of the proceeds go out, they don't stay in.
Last year, we gave $30,000 to Meals on Wheels for the
Thank you. Kent?
I was just gonna say, for those people that might have veterans involved, you need to go to the veterans, they help you with a plaque, if you need a plaque. And they also will, I think there's a pittance of $250 or $500 that they will send to the veteran.
Yeah, just as a last word, because my dad was a veteran, the local VFW, because my father was a Vietnam vet, often they have as a ministry, they will build the flag holder with the glass and put a name on it, and they do that for nothing. Of course, you can make a donation for them for doing it, right? But often that's the case. And so my father's flag is in a lovely case that was made by the local VFW. And sometimes you just don't know to ask for it, but they love to do it. By the way, if you have any questions about, hey, how do I do this or that? All I can tell you is I don't know, but I'm happy to answer them if I can.
The funeral home is great.
Funeral home should do it too. Hey, thanks everybody.
Thank you.